Bureau. Cooper Petagna joins us right now. He is the national recruiting analyst for 24/7 Sports. And Cooper, I'm just being completely honest with you. I think we've talked more recruiting in the last week and a half than we have since probably last December. Things have been popping here in the Magnolia State, and kind of interested to get your take. Let's start with Mississippi State. This week in particular has been busy for Zach Arnett and the Bulldogs.
Yeah, it's been a great week, man. First of all, I appreciate you having me, but, they're getting things going. It's funny, I was on the show earlier today, and that was kind of the same thing. June, July really starting to heat up, and for whatever reason, it seems like with early signing day in December now over the last couple of years, but it seems like a lot of these guys are starting to pop June, July. It's starting to become a lot busier time for us. We're just out in L.A. and for the Elite 11 last week, so it's busy season. But no, with Mississippi State, man, I think they're attacking their board and they're attacking in-state, so you got to give them a lot of credit. And it's kind of a different kind of urgency, I would say, in the first couple of months of the Arnett era. So excited about what they're doing. Same with Ole Miss, and it should definitely make for an exciting couple months ahead of us in the fall.
So Cooper, with recruiting philosophy at Mississippi State over multiple coaching staffs, this has kind of been the time of year when they have traditionally kind of started to really add to that class. They do the big the big dog camp or the top dog camp, whatever it is. Hey, Dad gets mad at me for never remembering what it's called. And then seem to get commitments from that. But it goes a little bit farther after that with the announcement earlier this week from J.J. Harrell out of North Panola and Sardis, Mississippi, and then Stonka Burnside right there in Starkville. What do we need to know about those two guys? Mississippi guys ranked with 4 stars, staying in home and both going to Starkville.
Well, they're both really complementary pieces, and I like them. I think when you look at Burnside, more of a physical slot receiver, can play outside and can do a lot of different things, but strong at the catch point and very productive in terms of run after catch. Had over 1,100 yards receiving last year, I think double-digit touchdowns. So he's a big physical kid, stocky build. Got to see him in Atlanta in February at the Under Armour Atlanta Combine. And, with the other one, J.J. Harrell that you mentioned, being able to flip him from Tennessee, that's a big one. More unknowns with him. We don't have a lot of verified data points on him, but in terms of what he can do, he can take the top off of defense. I think he is a vertical threat, and I think is a guy who could probably see the field day one just because what he adds from a speed element. So I like what they're doing there, those two in-state guys. I mean, that's what you want. You want to build your receiver room kind of like a basketball team. Everybody's a little bit different. So I like those two guys in-state, and definitely guys they made priorities and got in the boat early.
Cooper, over in Oxford, the big story was the commitment of 2023 quarterback Austin Simmons. Sort of talk us through how a 2025 player reclassifies to 2023, and what is he going to bring to what is already a loaded Ole Miss quarterback room?
Yeah, that's a great question. We've been kind of doing a little extensive deep dive behind the scenes. I do think he's a little bit older. I got to go back and research. I don't know if he was held back or what. Obviously, high academic kid as well. So you take all that into consideration. But when you watch him, I mean, he's a mature pocket passer. He's got a baseball background, quick twitch in the pocket, can navigate, and a guy that is really sharp at the short to intermediate part of the field. I really like this kid, guys, in terms of the upside. Now, his grade might take a little bit of a knock going from 25 to 23. It's a hard thing to project sometimes. But if you're an Ole Miss fan, I'd be really excited about him. I do like the way he fits. I mean, the biggest thing is we don't have a big sample size on this, right? Guys reclassifying different grades. Austin Mack did it on the West Coast this past year at the University of Washington from 24 to 23. So it's going to be interesting. I mean, the biggest thing that you can't replicate is reps and that experience. So that's going to be the challenge for Lane Kiffin and company is how do you simulate those reps for a guy like Austin Simmons, who you mentioned it, right? I mean, Spencer Sanders, you talk about Walker Howard, some of the other guys, Jackson Dart obviously in there as well. That's a loaded room, not to mention Damon Williams, right? So who we got to see in Los Angeles this past week, who's really talented in his own right. So he's a little bit different of a flair, I think more of a traditional pocket passer, but I like his fit there. It's just hard to see, like, when is he going to see the field? It's a competitive room.
Cooper, so much of Ole Miss's recruiting under Lane Kiffin over the last couple of years has been through the transfer portal. They've intentionally signed smaller classes Do you see a little bit of a philosophy shift for the Ole Miss staff, maybe with the addition of Pete Golding on the defensive side back to high school?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Obviously, I think the biggest thing that has stood out to me is what they've done in the defensive line so far. I mean, Cameron Beavers is a guy that we haven't talked a lot about, but I love the kid's upside, big, physical, nasty nose tackle in the middle. I think he's going to attract a lot of attention. The other kid, Jeffrey Rush, man, he's a menace. So, yeah, I think Pete Golding's come in and he's kind of, injected a little bit of that philosophy, understands the importance of building organically through high school. And I'll tell you why, because everybody's looking for point-of-attack players, whether it's offense or defensive line in the transfer portal. It's a really saturated market. So when you have those guys in state, you got to keep them in state. So I don't know if it's a pivot. I think it's more case by case. I think there are obviously going to be a fair share of guys on their way out after this year for Ole Miss, and I think they see an opportunity in state, kind of build a little bit more organically. Maybe that hadn't been there the last couple of years.
Cooper, this is a fantastic year for talent in the state of Mississippi. I think 24/7 has a couple of 5-star kids and then a whole boatload of 4-stars. You've got 3 kids that are currently committed out of state on the 24/7 top 10, and that's Jamonte Waller, who just committed to Florida this past week. Kanan Daniels also committed to Florida, and Norrell White committed to Arkansas. Are those 3 guys that you see those commitments holding up, or are they going to end up being in state, at state or Ole Miss one way or the other? Are flips possible with those guys?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think you guys know this, and you can't rule out anything in the day of NIL, right? So Jamonte Waller obviously committing here this past week to University of Florida. I mean, I think these are typically ones that play out till the end. Now, I think there is a lot more alignment with the people and the parties involved, especially if NIL is involved. So we'll see. But, yeah, especially in the case of Norrell White as well. I think these are open, man, like especially when it comes to Mississippi, the way these recruitments have panned out in the past. Like, it's not done until pen goes to paper. And if you're Ole Miss, Mississippi State, you're going to continue to recruit these guys because you never know what's going to happen in the fall, right? And you might win games. Mississippi State might surprise. All of a sudden, you're sitting there in a really good position to get these guys in the boat.
What are you thinking about Kamarian Franklin? That's another guy that's highly coveted. I think took a recent visit to Ole Miss. Somebody that I know the Rebels would love to add, but so would just about every other team in the South.
He's a good player, man. I mean, he's over 6'5", he's 275. For us in the evaluation process, we kind of joke about it. It's always hard to kind of get eyes on these Mississippi guys. They don't go to a lot of events, right? But Kamarian Franklin was down in Miami today working out for Mario Cristobal and the Canes. And my good friend Andrew Ivins, who's our director of scouting at 24/7 Sports, was able to get some eyeballs on him. So in terms of what he saw, a lot of burst, explosiveness off the edge, maybe a little tight in the hips, but there's not one program out there that wouldn't take Kamarian Franklin. So I think this is a guy, best football ahead of him, had, 19 sacks last year in 2022. So uber productive, got the basketball background. Like, there are not a lot of creatures kind of walking around like him, right? So when you're able to get your hands on him, you got to capitalize. So I can see, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, I love what Ole Miss is doing in the trenches. If they were able to add him to Jeffrey Rush and Cameron Beavers, that would be a heck of a trio right there.
Visiting with Cooper Petagna. He is National College Football recruiting analyst at 24/7 Sports. Just a couple of minutes left. Florida's popped up a couple of times, right? Billy Napier and that Gators staff they've been hot the last month or so. I'm so fascinated by what's going on at Florida because they weren't great on the field. Their schedule the next 2 years is ridiculously hard. Are Billy Napier and that staff going to have enough time to build, and are they doing it the right way on the recruiting front? Have they finally kind of gotten everything organized and everybody pulling in the right direction?
Well, listen, I liked what they did last year on the recruiting trail. I think a lot of people kind of gloss over that, right, because they were in the middle of it with a guy like Jaden Rashada, and that ended up kind of being a little bit of egg on the face in terms of public. Again, this year with Austin Simmons, and then like 24 hours later, it's like Austin Simmons is in the rear view, right, with the run that they had last week. So, listen, They got a lot of resources there. That was part of the pitch when Billy Napier came there, is that, listen, we're going to kind of bring an Alabama structural organization. I think they're doing a really good job on the recruiting trail. I will say this, though. Like, that 2024 schedule is brutal, and it comes down to quarterback. You don't have the quarterback play, then all of a sudden, regardless of what you're doing long term, I don't know, the question is, can they get enough done short term? right? And the way last year ended at Las Vegas Bowl, Oregon State, ugly loss. And then you think about the quarterback room this year. It's like, I like the young pups, but you got Jack Miller, and, you know, outside of that, you're pretty limited, right? So it'd be interesting. DJ Lagway, I like a lot.
Wait, hold on. Are you not buying Graham Mertz stock, Cooper?
Graham Mertz, that's right, yeah. No, and with all due respect to Graham Mertz, but no, like, if that's the guy that if you're hitching your wagon to, yeah, I'm a little skeptical there. So we'll see what happens with Billy Napier. I like the way they're recruiting. The long-term vision, I see it. Short-term, it's like you got to find a way to generate some wins, get into the postseason, get a little excitement, get the wind at your back.
Cooper, great stuff, man. Really